Hi. Okay, so can you start off by like just introducing yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Jake Ware. I'm 25 years old. Pretty much just a normal dude. I like music and food and stuff like that. But I also have a condition called avoidant personality disorder, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, great. So before like we get into like a more personal thing, can you talk about what avoidant personality disorder is for people who don't know what it is at all?
Yeah, so it's one of 10 personality disorders as defined by like the DSM-5 mental health standard, and it affects men and women equally. The main thing is that it's extreme and constant social anxiety, right? And it comes from a fear of judgment or rejection. You're really constantly worried about what people think about you and that you're making them uncomfortable and
Mhm.
that no one wants to be around you, basically, right? So usually people with ABPD have pretty low self-esteem, and if you don't like yourself, then it's like you have a hard time believing anyone else could, right? So you really try to avoid being around people. Socializing seems to get harder instead of easier when you do it, and when we do have to interact with others, we're really focused on a lot of small details of our anxiety, like for example, I might be worrying about exactly what I look like if part of my hair looks weird or something.
Sure.
Um, if something that I say is sounds stupid either because the words were stupid or because I misspoke a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, Things like my body language. I'm really uncomfortable, so I'll put my hands in my pockets and then I'll think that looks weird and take my hands out of my pockets and just keep doing that sort of thing. But I also worry about those little details in other people, not so much, um, the negatives for them, right? It's more like what they're thinking about me.
Okay.
I look at their body language really closely and their facial expressions, and all of this is unconscious. I don't do it on purpose. I just realize I'm doing it later,
Of course.
and it's because I'm looking for any sign that I'm making them uncomfortable, right? So as you can probably imagine, it makes it really hard to focus on anything. It's really hard to have a conversation.
Mhm.
But if you're doing something more than having a conversation, good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and our body tends to malfunction too. I like lose dexterity and start shaking. It's really uncomfortable. And so social interaction, as much as we often want it, it can feel really fruitless and humiliating. And so we end up trying to avoid it, which, has social consequences. We don't really feel fulfilled, right? It's really hard to have relationships, friendships. And we're often either unemployed or underemployed, doing jobs that are easier than what we could handle just because we need to feel super confident that we can do it, right?
Right. Okay. So in that context, like, is it easier for you to do a job when like no one's around?
It is definitely easier, but it has its own struggles too because the whole thing about a job is that at some point you have to interact with someone so that they can receive your work and you get paid, right? So you still have that fear that you're not doing things well enough. I really don't like to do anything in exchange for money because it's like I don't feel like I'm ever doing a good enough job that I deserve that, right?
Okay.
So yeah, it's definitely a difficulty.
Oh my God, that is
But
really difficult.
yeah,
Okay, so would that would like be difficult for you to even charge people money, right? Because like you wouldn't know what to like if you're worth the money. I don't know if I'm able to.
yeah, exactly. So pretty much the only thing I'm able to do right now as far as work is I'm an author. I've released one book so far. It's about avoidant personality disorder, and you know, it's for sale, but I also give it away to people who ask for it because I don't feel good about asking for money for it.
Wait, don't.
I really like to just help people with it. You
Okay,
know.
listen up. Okay, on a side note, please send me a link to the book. We are totally promoting the book, okay?
Okay.
With the actual price, or maybe more. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Thanks for telling me that. Oh my God, that's awesome. So just a little, I was very intrigued by this. So, like, what exactly would be like your internal monologue. So like, are you always thinking with regards to other people? Or like, is it like, I don't know if I'm able to frame this right, but
It's definitely very subconscious a lot of the time, right? It's kind of just worries that you can feel, and the best way to describe it is like what you're thinking about other people. Um, but honestly, the internal monologue is kind of petrified a lot of the time. Like it's not very clear. It's not, there's not a whole lot going on. You're kind of just trying to make it through, right?
yeah.
So yeah, you don't really have too many thoughts at all consciously, honestly, while you're talking to people. And it's just, it's really a way to describe it afterwards.
Oh, okay. So it sounds a little bit like social anxiety, but it obviously isn't just social anxiety, right? So could you
Yeah,
talk about how it's a little different from that? Because I mean, I'm pretty sure
absolutely.
there's a lot of like clash there, but then again,
Yeah. So it's it's definitely social anxiety. That's mostly what it is, but there's a few sort of important differences, and I kind of see it as a spectrum between social anxiety and AVPD.
oh,
It's not described that way diagnostically,
mhm,
but like for me, I started getting really anxious around the age of 11. I definitely could have been diagnosed with social anxiety disorder by around the age of 14.
okay,
And, I think full on AVPD started probably around 17 for me. Um, so there's definitely differences that you can experience throughout your life with it. But for me, some of the differences are as a personality disorder, it's constant, it's intense, and persistent. So it doesn't really matter who I'm talking to, right? So I am anxious talking to strangers. I
right,
am anxious in crowds, and those are social anxiety things for sure.
absolutely.
But I'm also anxious talking to my family and friends. There's pretty much no one I'm not anxious around. My brother's definitely my closest friend, and I'm the least anxious around him, but it really never goes away. And, it also goes further than, just the interaction itself. So I have really difficulties with trusting people. I have a
Mm,
very hard time expressing myself emotionally
okay.
because I feel like people don't see me as genuine,
Hmm.
no matter how genuine I feel, right? And so I definitely understand how to express myself emotionally. It's just like really painful to be able to do that. And also, a lot of people with ABPD have difficulties with physical contact. Like I get nauseous when I have to hug my parents.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and that's something I've definitely heard from other people with ABPD as well.
mhm,
Um, so, definitely, those are things that you might not see with social anxiety.
mhm,
Another thing is sort of where it comes from. I guess I feel like social anxiety can sort of be seen as like having doubts about who you are presently, right?
mhm.
And I feel like AVPD can be seen kind of more as a certainty. You're pretty sure you're not a likable person.
Okay.
And it also extends more than just the present. It's not just things you're worried about yourself right now. It's also just this long-term feeling you have from throughout your life that nobody likes you and you make people uncomfortable. Um, so I have constant feelings of shame, and there aren't a whole lot of things I do like about myself, and I have to really, try to believe them. And obviously, now that I'm aware I have AVPD, I spend a lot of time, trying to be conscious of that and remind myself I'm not a bad person. But it definitely takes a lot of work. Um,
I'm so
and
sorry. This sucks. I'm sorry. I just had to say it. Okay, please
no,
continue. Yeah.
totally fine. So and the third major difference I would say is that it doesn't really matter how I'm talking to people. So obviously, social anxiety can have a lot of difficulties interacting with people in person,
Mhm,
and phone calls for sure.
mhm,
Um, I also have struggles with writing texts and emails.
mhm.
And I even have a hard time posting things anonymously online where, no one knows it's me, right? But still, if someone doesn't like the things that I said, then it hurts me personally, right? Um, even though um, it's not like I think there's something wrong with people disagreeing with me, of course, but it's painful and it makes you feel sort of reinforced in this idea that you don't have good thoughts and all of that. Um, and I don't actually have to be talking to people at all.
Mhm.
And I think this is another thing that can differ from social anxiety. You know, I can be in a quiet public area, like getting gas from my car or just taking a walk around my neighborhood, and that's really hard still, even if no one's talking to me. Even if no one's around, you know, they could walk out the door at any moment, right? And so I'm just kind of worried about those possibilities all the time. You know, going to get my mail out of my mailbox is hard. So, um, and yeah, there's some other weird things like I and some other people I've talked to experience secondhand shame when talking to other people or just seeing other people do something embarrassing. It makes you embarrassed, even if they're not embarrassed by it, right? It's
Okay.
really weird. And it can even happen with fictional characters. And I'm not the only person that said this, but like watching TV shows
Yeah.
is really painful for me because when the characters do something embarrassing, which is obviously, you know, part of the story,
Mhm.
it embarrasses you and you have to like stop watching it and just kind of calm down for a minute. It's really weird. So I don't watch TV a whole lot for that reason. So I sometimes feel embarrassed when I'm on my own. If I do something silly, I embarrass myself when no one else is around.
Mhm.
So I guess the main thing with AVPD is it feels like everything you do in your life can end up acting as a reason to fear and avoid others because you're so embarrassed by yourself. So it pretty much is social anxiety, but it's got some more complications for sure.
A thousand. Okay, so it basically just sounds like extreme criticism and judgment, like 24/7, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, for sure.
I'm just very curious though, like, is this something that grows over time with like experiences of rejection more and more?
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of people find that usually personality disorders develop by early adulthood at latest.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of people with AVPD find that it was a lot of early childhood experiences, maybe with their parents, could
Mhm.
be with teachers, um, where they just felt like they were constantly messing up and everyone was judging them for it. And so it sort of gets to be really intense by the time you're an adult. And yeah, every bad experience can stack on it more. And you know, good experiences don't put too much of a dent in it because it's, you know, it's just a really deep pattern in your brain. And so it's definitely very difficult.
Okay, I'm really sorry. And actually, what I find really interesting, particularly about ABPD, is I've seen a lot of clash with the cluster B. Not literally. I know, like, I mean, not the way the clusters act, but like with the childhood. The whole thing of like criticism and judgment. Like I've seen the same with people diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder as well. So I don't know if that's okay.
Yeah, it's almost like the opposite polarity, right? Because instead of, you know, wanting to feel perfect, I guess,
Mhm.
you sort of you have that same sort of perfectionism, but it's because you want to just feel adequate, right? And just acceptable at a basic level. But yeah, it does have some similarities in that strange way.
Absolutely. And do you think just a little because technically people with NPD are also kind of faking the confidence, right? Like it's not really real, if I'm being honest. And to be very honest, you're doing really well. So you seem pretty confident right now as I speak. So um um at any point does it just come naturally for you or do you always have to just
It really doesn't. You know, it's hard to say because I definitely act like a totally different person when I'm interacting with people, and who
Mhm.
it is changes exactly how. But it's not like something I consciously try to fake, but it's definitely something where you get better at it. And I'm also using notes to some degree for this interview, which definitely helps because a lot of the struggles I have in actual conversations is, you know, no ability to be prepared for what the conversation is going to be about. And obviously, that's part of what's fun about them if you're able to handle that, right? But people with really bad anxiety tend to, like I said, I can't think clearly. So if I was doing this totally off the hip, it would definitely be a little more disorganized and I'd be getting a little more flustered. But in
Because,
general, I've been told a lot that I come across as pretty confident. And it's very confusing for me because I'm feeling the anxiety the whole time
oh,
and I'm not like actively faking confidence. It's just me trying my best and, still feeling like it's not great. And apparently it works out all right. So thank you.
you're doing really great. I think the only thing that's kind of judging you is you. So uh,
That's how it tends to be.
it does be. Um, is there any way to like actually do something about this? Because to be very fair, of all like I've researched quite a lot, but like they don't really speak much about like how to deal with ABPD because people with BPD and NPD and even OCD actually from the same cluster, like they have something they can do about it, right? But I don't really
Yeah.
know much about what to do about ABPD. So could you talk about that? In case
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So it's definitely something that is under researched, and I really hope that at some point professionals will put more time into the disorder. There's obviously some obstacles with that. We're hard to reach people sometimes, for sure. Um, but my opinion on it so far, and it could change. I'm still pretty young, and I've only known about my diagnosis for about 3.5 years. I feel like the anxiety symptoms don't really significantly improve or get easier to deal with.
Mhm.
Um, but with a lot of effort, you can significantly improve how you actually respond to them, right? So I used to try to get over my anxiety to figure out things I could do to make it not exist anymore, because obviously that would be great. But I don't think that's super realistic for people with AVPD. So now what I try to do is just things that make me happy, and if those things also make me anxious, I still try really hard to do them, right? So
Okay.
basically, I ask myself a couple of questions before I decide whether I'm going to do something. So I ask myself, can I do this? Not should I be able to do this or will I be able to do this at some point in my life later?
Mhm.
Just am I able to do it right now? Can I manage it? And two, do I actually want to do it? Not do I feel like I should do it or someone's expecting me to do it or I'm expecting me to do it, but that I actually want to. Um, so I spent a lot of my life trying to just push myself to be normal because that's what I wanted and that's what everyone else thought would happen because a lot of people experience anxiety and get over it.
Mhm.
But with AVPD, that doesn't necessarily happen. So I find you need to take baby steps where you're pretty sure you're going to succeed and feel better about it yourself afterwards. Some days they're bigger than you expect, and some days you really just can't make any progress. And you should honestly be proud of the fact that you made it through it all. So um, it's definitely the sort of thing where you can for sure improve your happiness through the anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, I so far have not been successful in actually reducing the anxiety, but I would still like to for sure. So if I ever figure anything out about that, I'll make it known for sure.
Oh God. Would you I mean this is not something that's really a cure, but has medication ever been of help in case you've taken medication before?
Yeah. So I have a psychiatrist right now, and I tried quite a few meds, and I have had some success with some of them.
Right.
Antidepressants, I think, can be really helpful because you're going to be depressed while dealing with this disorder for pretty obvious reasons. And it took me like 6 or 7 to find one that worked,
Mhm.
but I did, and that has been helpful for sure. I still have trouble with depression, but it's definitely a lot easier.
Right.
Um, I also take medication that helps with physical anxiety symptoms like chest pain and stomach aches and all of that sort of thing. And you're definitely going to deal with that with AVPD. And that has been helpful. And I think that probably helps people pretty consistently.
Right.
Um, so I guess the main struggle is medications that actually reduce the anxiety itself. There aren't a whole lot of them. They tend to be addictive or have the possibility of being addictive. And they're definitely not, 100%. They don't work all of the time necessarily,
Okay.
and you can't take them all of the time necessarily because you can only take so much of it, right?
Mhm.
And they often come with side effects that are really unhelpful, like making you super drowsy, and then you can't drive and stuff like that.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I've tried some of those. I haven't found anything that works yet. I know there are some people who have found some help through that.
Okay.
So it's the sort of thing I'm going to continue to try for sure.
Okay. Oh, good luck for that. To be very
Thank you.
honest with you, I personally don't think medication should be something people should resort to for anything because, like you said, it gets addictive.
Yeah,
It's like, once again, you're depending on something that's not you.
yeah,
And what happens when you stop, right? Like it goes
yeah.
back to square one. So, um, with regards to the anxiety, right? Do you have any like physical symptoms that always seem to happen? Like I don't
Yeah,
know, fighting or the typical anxiety sort of symptoms.
yeah, for sure. So it definitely varies depending on how anxious I am, but I have shaking really bad sometimes, usually in my arms. Sometimes my teeth chatter, which is really embarrassing. Fortunately, that doesn't happen very much. I tend to get stomach aches pretty much constantly. I'll have trouble breathing and pain in my chest, and I can have headaches. So really, kind of the whole range of stuff can happen. Fortunately, propranolol does help with that some,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, those definitely can happen.
I don't really know if this is gonna be of like any help, but does like exercising or like breathing exercises just work at all for things like these?
Um,
A little bit either.
I personally have not found success with those a whole lot.
Right.
I have started exercising recently, and um, it does help in some ways, and self-esteem related. But as far as the physical symptoms of anxiety, not as much for me. I have heard from people who have said they have been helped by breathing exercises and such. So it's definitely something worth trying.
Okay. So, um, with regards to like improving or like getting a little comfortable with your own skin, right? Um, would you okay, so you said take baby steps, right? Now, um, by doing things that would make you feel better, you are probably also at the same time going inside your shell because you're sticking to things you will be good at, right?
Yeah. So let me expound on that a little bit. So I guess what I mean is you should do the hardest things that you feel pretty sure you can do.
Oh,
So it is about pushing yourself, but um, whereas if you talk to a therapist about exposure therapy, they might suggest you make some phone calls, schedule some job interviews, things like that. Um, I think if you're at the lower functioning end of ABPD, that is going to be really difficult and embarrassing, and it's going to make you feel worse about yourself. So I think you need to just sort of form your own ideas about the sort of exposure that you can handle right now, because um, the average person maybe um, wouldn't need to take steps that are as small as yours. But you are still trying to push yourself. You're just doing it very slowly. So for example, for me, last year, going out to get my mail was the sort of step that I needed to do. That was still very stressful for me, definitely not comfort zone, but also very easy for most people, right? Um, but I've definitely moved on since then, and I've started doing runs at public trails and such sometimes,
okay.
and yeah, so um, it's definitely steps forward. It's just steps that would seem small to someone that doesn't have AVPD, but when you do have it, they're still pretty big. So yeah, you're definitely still trying to move forward.
I just want to say I'm really proud of you. I put that out there. But okay, so do you suggest taking risks once in a while or not? Because
Yes.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I'm so it's okay. You can continue. It's fine.
Well, I definitely think you should. It's just you need to be calculated about what they are. So you need to be sure that it's a risk that you really want to take, right? That's the main thing. Um, or of course, if you have absolutely no choice, sometimes that happens. But if you have the choice, then you should make sure it's something you really want to do. And if you succeed, you'll feel really good about it. And if you don't succeed, you'll still feel like, well, I really wanted to do that, and I'm glad I tried. Um, so those are the main things. Try not to put too much pressure on yourself as far as things you feel like you should do. That's the main thing. As long as you feel like you actually want to do it, and it seems that it could be within your grasp, then absolutely you should take some risks.
Okay, thanks for that. And this is one more thing I just want to touch upon. So when you are like when you're diagnosed with ABPD, of course, like the career options, it kind of gets limited because you don't want to interact with people much, right? Or even if you do have like career options that you want to pursue, it might be difficult to do those things. So could you just like advise on like how you navigate like career and earning money? Because I mean we all need food and water, right? So
Yeah, so that's definitely a very good question. I wish I had a very good answer for it. Unfortunately, for me, ABPD has been a really very real disability, and like I said, I've had limited success working actual jobs. As since I was around 11 years old, I wanted to be a game developer. Um, I started learning to program then, and it's really frustrating because it's a job I feel like I definitely could do. But the social interactions part's really hard, right? Working on a team for those sorts of things
mhm,
is definitely very challenging. And I haven't been able to find a good way to really proceed with that simply because, when it's so hard to even focus on having a conversation with another person, how can you focus on working with all these other people, right? Um, so what a lot of people with ABPD end up doing is being underemployed and doing simpler jobs than they could handle
mhm.
just because those jobs sometimes require less interaction. They have less surprises, they're more predictable. And it's just you feel more confident about it because it's so simple that even if something does go wrong, it's
Mhm.
still not that complicated. It's nothing you can't figure out.
Right.
Um, And I think you do have to be realistic about your limitations because if you have AVPD, there's a ton that you can achieve, but it can sometimes come with a cost in that you know dealing with this anxiety constantly and feeling like you're embarrassing yourself constantly, even
Mhm.
though it's really not that big of a deal, it's illogical. It still hurts you, and you have a really hard time forgetting about the things you do that make you feel
Right.
like a silly person, basically. And so I would say the number one thing is you need to find a career that is something that you're sure that you really want to do, so that the struggling will be worth it because you can do it. You're smart enough to do it. You're hardworking enough to do it, but it's going to be hard. It's an uphill battle with the anxiety.
So I just have like a question. I don't know if people can even do this honestly. Um, do you think suppose I have BPD, right? And I take up a job that I know I'm pretty good at, but of course there's fear of rejection involved there as well, right? So if during the I wouldn't say interview or whoever your superior or whatever that is, you give them a diagnosis of you having ABPD and like tell them in simpler terms that you have social anxiety and that you can do a great job if you aren't being constantly like like on that road, but and you show them like your work or something. Do you think that might work? for people with ABPD? Is that something you've tried before?
Yeah, so I haven't. The last time I applied for a job was before I had my diagnosis, and I wasn't, I didn't understand myself well enough to do something like that.
Mhm.
Um, if I was to apply for a job now, I would absolutely try something like that. I think it would work to some extent. I think it probably depends on the field a little bit.
Right.
Um, some fields people are going to be pretty familiar with anxious people to some extent,
Yeah.
and in some fields, like maybe working at a restaurant, that's just not really something that can be accommodated, right? Because it's very fast paced for sure.
Right.
So yeah, it would definitely depend on what the career is, but I think it's absolutely something worth trying. And I think you should try to get a read on, the interviewer you're talking to, and um, see if you can gauge how they feel about that sort of thing. And for sure, I think it could be helpful.
Yeah, right. Like, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't really know either, but like, I mean, see, working at like a restaurant is like out of question because you obviously have to like talk to people. But suppose like you said you're into designing games, right? I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Okay, so although that would like involve interaction, that's still something you can do without like people being there constantly, right? So something that maybe requires like any career that involves less interaction, maybe, I don't know, you could talk to the
Absolutely, those are the things you have to go for. And I make some small game projects on my own.
okay.
Um, it's just that, of course, the things I really want to work on kind of need a big team. And definitely in these days, you could work remotely somewhere. And if you found that easier, that would be a good opportunity for sure.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of anxious people find that video calls can also be pretty stressful, just like
Oh,
real life.
right.
Um, and so, if it's the sort of thing where you still have to have very frequent meetings and talk to coworkers, which you do because it's a thing that requires collaboration for sure, um, it can still be very stressful. And it's the sort of thing where once you're into it, it
Mhm.
might be more manageable. And it's definitely the hardest step to get there in the first place, because you're taking a risk and you don't know if it's going to be a good fit for you. And if it turns out to be, then you're good. And if you're not, then um, it can be really hard to try again.
Right, because it pushes you down again, the same thing, like it makes you way worse. Um, do you think like having someone, you know how like musicians have like the manager, right? So the music
Hmm.
just like goes and performs, but he doesn't really do the bookings and the talking, right? So do you think having like hiring a manager or something like that to do the communication might work?
It also depends on the field for sure. With something like game development specifically, as a programmer, if I'm hiring a manager that knows how to explain what I'm talking about, then he could just do my job, right?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so it definitely depends on the field, but there are probably somewhere that could be helpful.
Do you think I'm sorry this is like personal, but like you said you comfy with your brother, right? So
Hmm.
if it were just like a little bit of talking, you think maybe he could do that for you?
Um, potentially. I guess the main thing is I feel like in most jobs you don't know exactly when that's going to come up, right?
Right.
So it does kind of end up being a full-time job for the person that's helping you as well.
Mm.
Um, so if they have their own things going on, it's very hard to make it work, and you have to be making enough money that you can afford to pay them, ideally, right? So I think it's something that could work for some people, but I think in a lot of situations it's probably just a little unrealistic, but it could be helpful for sure.
1,000%. So, I just want to like end with like one more question. With regards to the helping, right? Now, let's say you have like a loved one that has ABPD. How can you really help or assist in any way?
Yeah, it's definitely a really hard question. I think the number one thing that people with AVPD need is just sort of acceptance, because you know, it's anxiety like you've probably experienced before in your life, except it just never goes away for these people, right? Um, so we know our fears are often illogical, and explaining that to us doesn't necessarily help because
Mhm.
we know that, and they just don't go away. They've been
Yeah,
here for a very long time. So it takes some level of just trusting that that's really what we're going through, and just being there for us. And, remembering why, like, if we don't want to go do fun things in public with you, if we seem to show little emotion, if we
right.
have a really hard time with physical affection, all of
Absolutely.
these things are because we're scared. And we're really scared that we're going to do something that makes you dislike us. And we really want to do those things and just be normal. But it takes a lot of time for us.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, and it doesn't take much for us to feel ashamed. So remember, if we appear embarrassed by something you said,
Hmm.
um, it's nothing to do with you. We don't dislike you for that.
Hmm.
We want to have a normal relationship where people can just say whatever they want and have normal conversations. So if something like that happens, just sort of carry on with the conversation and ignore it, and we'll be very thankful that you can sort of remind us it's not that big of a deal to be a little awkward, right? It's not that big of a deal to get a little embarrassed. So, you know, I think those are probably the main things you can do.
That's really helpful. Do you think like okay, so just a random thing. Okay, suppose someone with ABPD has a sort of irrational thought, right? And it's obviously making them more anxious because they're like ruminating over it. So with in some way telling them, hey, it's your ABPD, this is it's okay, it's not a big deal, help, or would that invalidate them?
Um, I would say more often than not, it isn't all that helpful. The main reason for that is because we probably already know. Um, when we're worrying about something, we kind of think through the whole cycle of it, of this is what I'm worried about.
Hmm.
This isn't a real worry, but I'm still worried about it. And it just sort of keeps going like that. Um, so if there is something, if there's very good evidence that they're worrying about something in particular that doesn't won't if there's a very good reason to believe that their worry is
Not
completely based in something that's not true, then sure, you should tell them. But usually, we know our worries are unlikely things, but not impossible things, right? And in that case, we're probably already aware of it, and
uh,
that it definitely makes us feel bad because we know there's about a 0% chance it's actually going to happen, but
right.
it's not quite zero. So yeah.
Shit. I mean, okay, just like coming from like someone who doesn't have ABPD. Now, when I'm anxious, right? So I do obviously know I'm being anxious for no reason, but it's pretty subconscious. So do you think like me probably like sitting down and explaining to you why you're overthinking is just overthinking and like, hey, this is proof that you're just thinking too much. This it's not gonna happen like work. Like at what point does it feel like you're crossing that person's boundaries, but you just genuinely want to like tell them it's just your brain.
Yeah. So I would say I think we're understanding of people wanting to try to do that, and we know that they're trying to be helpful, and we do appreciate that.
Like,
Um, and it can depend on the person with AVPD too, right? I'm just one, um, but for me, I'm thinking about my anxiety so much
hmm,
all the time that I'm really aware that it's over. I am I'm really constantly aware of that. It's definitely not subconscious for me,
mhm.
just because I spend so much time thinking about it, right? So I would say the situations in which that proves helpful have been pretty rare for me, but it will definitely vary depending on the person.
Is there anything in particular that distracts you from your anxiety just a little bit?
What I find to be most helpfully distracting from anxiety is completely using my brain for something else, which is part of the reason why, like, for example, if I'm trying to relax, I don't watch TV. because TV is intended to be kind of passive, right? You just sort of
Yeah,
sit there and watch it.
yeah.
Whereas, for example, playing video games or playing a sport or something,
Mhm.
um, those things sort of engage your mind more. And I find those things to be the absolute best for distracting me. Of course, if it was playing a sport, if I like sports, then that would involve other people, and that could certainly not distract me from the anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Whereas video games are something that I can do alone, and so it engages my brain and it doesn't add any more anxiety at the same time. So, and writing music can be a thing like that too, depending on my mood, So
Sounds like things like creative things help you.
for me, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So before I end this, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I know this is like really like you went a little extra mile for this, not the same as everyone else. And you did like really well. I'm just like genuinely, I'm not saying this to like flatter you. You genuinely did really well. And can you please like send me a link of your book? Is there like a physical copy as well that people can purchase on
Yeah.
app or something? There
Yep.
it is.
Yep, it's
Okay.
on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. Okay, perfect. Okay, I will send a link. And if there is any AVPD community or like a group that you have that people can like join and maybe talk,
Yep. I
is that
just started a Discord server, and I will send you a link to that, and I would strongly
okay?
encourage anyone to drop by and say hi.
Okay,
So
perfect.
yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I did try my best, and I feel pretty okay about it, and
Oh,
I'm
I'm
really happy I did it for sure.
you did awesome. And I'll send you the recording as well, so you can put this on your YouTube and our YouTube as well. Yeah, cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here. Bye. Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye.